Hi, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. And just a really huge shout out to all of you who've been subscribing to my channel and helping it grow. Really appreciate it. Today what I want to talk to you about is some basic settings in Artisan 6. So when I have somebody buy Artisan for the first time, they get it loaded on the computer, I like to suggest that they look into the initial default settings and change 3 things. For me personally, when I'm working on my projects, it just makes it a little bit more convenient. It's my preference, it may not be your preference. So I'll show you why I like to do what I do and find out if that's a fit for you. It's not right or wrong, it's just what works best for you. So why don't we go into my desktop, let me show you what I'm talking about. Welcome to my desktop. There's 3 things that I like to do when I first help somebody after they've installed Artisan. None of these are hard and fast rules. These are personal preference choices. So I'm going to show you a few things. Think about what you like, play around with these, and you'll determine what your preference is. My preference is not necessarily yours, and vice versa. If you notice, my background is dark. I've chosen to put Artisan in dark mode, and I've been enjoying that. That's something new that came out with the version 6 of Artisan. We didn't have this in version 5. However, in Historian, when I'm working with my photos, I actually prefer light mode. I don't know what the difference is, but for some reason, when there's a lighter background, I actually prefer that. So you'll find out what works for you. So let's say you want to give this a try. Go up here, right-hand side, you see this little circle with a question mark on it. Click on it once, click settings once. Very first thing is general. Application color scheme. You notice mine's in dark mode. Yours will be defaulted in light if you haven't changed it. One thing to note, in order for this to take effect, you need to click OK, turn off Artisan, give it a moment, turn it back on, then it will take effect. So if you change it to dark mode and then just go work in one of your books or one of your projects, it will not be in dark mode yet. So don't let that confuse you. Try it for a while, see what you think. You may not like it. You can always go back in here, settings, change it back to light mode. Okay, turn it off, turn it back on, you'll be back in light mode. So try both of them for a little while and see what your preference is. So the second thing that I like to address is the aspect ratio. So I'm going to go in here again, settings. The second thing is page editing. I choose personally to check this box off. It will be blank. You'll have to click on it if you like what I do. And I'll show you why I do it. I prefer that all of my elements that I bring in, whether it be a piece of paper, whether it be an embellishment, it comes in locked as an aspect ratio. No matter what I choose here, text boxes are not going to be part of that. When you add a text box, it will always be locked. Here's why. Here's why I like to do what I do. So I bring in these paw prints, and this one is unlocked on purpose. So that way I can show you when I go to make it bigger, it's stretched it. I can hold the shift key when it is unlocked and do the same thing, and the aspect ratio will stay intact. That works for some people. That's fabulous. I don't like remembering that, to be honest, because I forget all the time, and I just don't want that extra step. So when I bring in an element, whether it be an embellishment, whether it be a piece of paper, I want it to maintain its aspect ratio as a default. I can always unlock it if there's a reason that I want to stretch something, like this font right here. I believe it's been a while, but if I remember right, when I made this, it was a little bit shorter, and I've elongated it. I made it taller. So I did make the aspect ratio of that font a little bit taller than it should have been. So there are times that you want to do that. When you bring in a text box, it will be locked as a default. I have unlocked my aspect ratio. So as a default, what I do, I bring in a text box, I create it, and then I will right click on it and I will unlock the aspect ratio, just because that's me. So I can make it shorter without making it wider or smaller, make it the exact size I want. That's my personal choice. I can do the same thing by holding the shift key. So find what works for you and go with that. So I like to have the aspect ratio locked because it's just one less thing for me to think about. The nice thing about Artisan, and there's usually 2 or 3 ways to do anything. So whereas I tend to do a lot of right clicking and choosing something here, you might want to click on something over here in the elements panel, do the down menu and change it here. I like to have it default on being locked. You might like it better unlocked. So you do you, but these are some suggestions on my part. The third thing that I like to do is ask somebody what their favorite font is. So you probably have a favorite font and you may not even realize it. You just take a look at what you tend to gravitate towards when you do any kind of writing. I like Times New Roman. I like Californian. They're both very clean fonts. They're very easy to read. You can italicize them. You can bold them. Some fonts come in as kind of a bold font and you can't make it less so. Some you can't bold at all. Some are tall and skinny. Some are fat and short. You know, there's just all kinds of fonts out there in the world. So again, you click on this settings, this third thing here, text style. So you see mine's defaulted 11-point font, Californian FB, no bold, no italicized, no underline, just straight text, and it's black. You can always default the color something different if you want, but for the most part, black I think is what most people would use. You can decide whether you want your text to be at the top of the text box, the middle of the text box, or the bottom. Occasionally, those come into play. I just default on the top. I can always alter it. Your justification, I like justified on the left side. That's my personal choice. Some people like full justified. I don't like the spacing I see when things are full justified. Personal choice. Most people, you're not going to want the right justification, but some people, all of your journal boxes are centered. You can always do that if that's your preference. So you choose what you want here, click OK, and it'll be your default. Now remember, you can only choose one as your default. You can always change your font within a text box. That is not a problem. Think about your journaling. So whatever your journaling is on your page, that's what I think is the go-to font and size. When I'm doing a title, it changes all the time, but my basic journaling would be Californian. You do the drop-down menu here. Really, most everything that is on your hard drive should be available to you in here as a choice. So if I wanted chalkboard to be my default, I'd click on that. I might want to have a taller, smaller, bolded, whatever. You play around with that. I'm not going to click OK because I want to stick with what I have. When I had some stuff happen with the computer, and I didn't even realize this, but my monitor is set far back on my desk. So I actually have my aspect ratio on the monitor as 125%, I think it is. If you have not changed your default on your monitor, you're probably at 100%. That's normal. What I have, I don't think is necessarily normal. So if you're trying to figure out what font you want, what font size you want, if you come down here where it's defaulted on 50%, just click on that once, change it to 100%. Chances are the way that I'm reading this on your screen should be the size and legibility of how it's going to print. I found that I printed Times New Roman and Californian bigger in the past. And when I had it printed in my book, I realized it was a little bit too big for my taste. It's not a big deal. I mean, it makes it very legible. Anybody who has to wear glasses, they're going to easily read my books, but I just didn't like how big it was. So I kind of learned the hard way to make it smaller. So that's why I went from 12 or 13 down to 11. So that's my go-to. If you want to know if this actually is at 100% 1 inch. Hold up a ruler and see if between 1 and 2 here is an actual inch. For me, it's actually between 1 and 2, it's 1.25 inches. So it's actually bigger on my screen. So if you're not sure, what I would suggest is just take some text, put it in a Word document, paste it a few different times, change the size within the same font, change different fonts, print them out on your home printer, and get an idea of what size and what font is your preference, and go from there. So hopefully those tips are going to help you. Let me know if you have any questions about any of this. I know I talked a lot longer than I meant to, but I like to explain my thinking behind why I do certain things, because sometimes it's going to resonate with one person more than another. So take my tips as a grain of salt, test them out, find out what your preference is, because when you're working in Artisan, you want to make sure that you're happy with the end result. And everything that you can change up here, you can change back. So you might look at some of these other things. Most everything I've left at the default. The only 3 things that I tend to change are the 3 things that I shared with you. So play with that, see what works for you, and happy scrapbooking.